Jason X to the Third Power, Chapter 2. I'll assign lodging, Free said, but Linda and Brad were already heading toward one of the larger cabins that had a little porch at the front. Well, on second thoughts, maybe you should all select your own cabins, Free said, diplomatically. Anyar moved toward one to the right of the cabin Linda and Brad had already claimed. Herbert took the one to the right of hers. Free watched Sky head off even further to the right, toward the smallest cabin at the end of the row of 10, cut off from the others by 2. Obviously, she wanted to be alone. Free looked around at the desolate campground that once used to be a holiday destination for the rich and famous. It was meant to be rugged without actually being so. The grounds within the camp had been kept up, most likely by Jackson's crew, and the virtual world outside this immediate area was in pristine condition. The natural foliage outside the small camp area, however, had grown wild and resembled a jungle. The campgrounds had only a few patches of dry, wilted grass that probably received too much UV light. The soil was arid, too, and as the team of engineers walked toward their respective cabins, their feet kicked up dust. The grounds had also been equipped with picnic tables, swings, and some outdoor exercise equipment that had once been state-of-the-art, but were now considered standard. Free also saw an outdoor pool, an outdoor dining patio, which was adjacent to the indoor dining hall, and at the end of the road he spied a large man-made lake around which they must have held campfires. It was all in all a lovely place to spend a few weeks, but something about it troubled him. It could have been the symmetry. Wilderness, from what he'd seen in old pictures anyway, should have a logic all of its own. This place had a long abandoned feel, even though Jackson had gone to some trouble to make it look homey. Yet outside this small camp, the imposed virtual borderlines was something better suited to a suburban residential neighborhood on Earth 2. Here, it only seemed out of place, but made the camp, by contrast, seem shabby. The combination of the three environments, natural and orderly virtual, and natural wild, left him feeling uneasy, but he couldn't say why. At the same time, it was clear that Camp Americana had been pretty extravagant. The size of the virtual world surrounding it was enormous. They'd seen that from the sky. He imagined that the rich girls who had come here could have had anything they wanted, their heart's desires. Wealth could deliver that. Not that he had grown up in poverty, far from it. Jackson Mansfield had lavished on him and his mom everything they needed and ever wanted. But his mother had always been reticent to take too much, insisting that both she and her son work to pay for their keep, even though Jackson didn't require that they do so. It was as if she didn't want to owe Jackson anything. Free had always wondered if his independent mom and Jackson had been having an affair during the 24 years of his life. Neither of them spoke of it. He didn't imagine that Jackson ever would. He guessed he would just never know. Free selected the cabin to the left of Linda and Brad's, leaving an empty building between them. Built of wood and titanium, the door opened with a loud creak, putting extra emphasis on the fact that it had been quite a while since anyone had been inside. Man-made cobwebs clung to the corners of the door and the frames of the 2 windows on either side of the cabin, and he saw a large white spider heading towards 6 flies placed in its web. Jackson had gone to a lot of trouble. Despite the Halloween decorations inside, the place was spotless and almost empty. If these were the original cabins that had been used by the camp, Free imagined that Jackson's cleaning crew had worked pretty hard to eliminate what was left behind. They must have suctioned out everything from the large vacuum port underneath the window, sucking out every piece of dust and dirt and debris left behind when the camp had been vacated. The walls were freshly painted as well. Even the floorboards had been sanded down, as if whatever had been on them was too much to just mop away. Of course, Free wouldn't have been surprised if Jackson had built all this, just to give them an intriguing environment that somewhat corresponded with the history of the place. At least the history that Joe had presented. Thoughts of Joe were depressing, and Free knew he had better get over it and move on so that he could organize his staff. They were depending on him. Free's cabin was a long, narrow building that had housed 8 campers, or so it seemed from the number of insta-beds and with small armoires next to them attached to the walls. 4 on each side of the room. At the back was a modern polymorphine washroom, devoid of any personal effects. Simple quarters, meant for a short stay at Camp Americana. One thing that astonished Free was the lack of technology inside the cabin. No computer, no monitor, no cube programmers, no gadgets of any type, nothing to indicate that they were in the 24th century on an abandoned moon that belonged to Earth 2. He wondered who, if in fact anyone, had stayed here 20 years ago. How the camp had been run, who had run it, what it had been like in the evenings under whatever starlight could make it down through the layers of zephyr glass that covered the many domes. He passed his hands over one of the sensor pads on the wall, and one of the beds came down, already made up for sleep as if it had been waiting for him for decades. Another panel brought down an armoire of metal. He opened the door and saw a bar come across the top for hanging clothes, and 3 drawers at the bottom to store other items. He smiled. It was just like his armoire at home. Free tossed his bag onto the floor beside the armoire and sat down on the bed, testing the mattress and surveying the room that would be his for a while. His first room away from home. It was eerie in a way, this empty space, no more than 75 square meters altogether. So quiet. He wondered at the lack of humming digital components and the absence of familiar lab sounds. This was nothing like his living quarters on Jackson's satellite. He had grown up in a room adjacent to a tech lab. At home, his immediate environments had been filled with the latest imaging equipment, which allowed him to create objects from nothing but the most basic computer language of zeros and ones. That was how he had lived from as early as he could remember. Now, to be without the latest equipment and technology left him feeling both liberated and a little unnerved. He lay back, suddenly exhausted from having to contend with so much newness. Especially so many new people, none of whom seemed to be that pleasant. He wasn't used to people. His world on the satellite had been small. His mom, Jackson, a few of the techies in residence. Cargo ships had docked twice a year bringing supplies, and at those times he would sometimes meet some of the crew, and maybe share a beer with them. But he could always go back to his own space when he needed to. And in 7 days they'd be gone. Now, all of a sudden, he was plunged into an arena with a bunch of strangers. Strangers he had to lead, who had great expectations of him. Anyar was okay. She seemed to be the nicest of the lot, but a bit distant. Maybe they'd get to be friends. Already he thought of her as a kid sister, although he didn't have a sister or a brother, and Anyar wasn't a kid. Herbert, he knew he couldn't trust. The guy was afraid of his own shadow. And Free got the feeling he would side with the person who talked the loudest and longest, switching his allegiances by the second. Free figured it was up to him to be the powerful one, to keep Herbert on side. Boy, it was starting to seem exhausting being the leader. Linda and Brad he saw as a nasty piece of cohabitation, together or apart, and he wondered if he'd ever see them apart. He suspected he wouldn't like either of them. He just hoped they would be okay to work with. Sky. Now, she was quite an enigma. Clearly she was brilliant, but so bitchy. He didn't know why he felt attracted to her because she hadn't been nice to him at all. He felt she was the one who would be hardest to get close to. She radiated a fuck-off attitude along with the just leave me the fuck alone, will you, undercurrent. Still, she was gorgeous, the eye candy that they used to refer to on original Earth, from what he learned from his books. Pretty? No, beautiful. He wondered what she thought of him. Maybe she had no thoughts yet. Maybe... I hate to interrupt your ponderings, a snide voice said. Free's body jerked and his eyes snapped open. He looked around. He was still alone. The door closed. It seems your colleagues are searching for you. Free sat up. Major Tom, right? He said to the computer voice. That's what they call me. Or I should say, called. Now that I've been reprogrammed, I'm an entirely new being. Perhaps I should have a new name. Free had seen and heard some of the latest AI computers being created, because that's what Jackson's vast network of corporations specialized in. And this one had just sounded like Linda and then changed back to this Major Tom character. What was up with this AI? He'd even worked on building some of them, but he had never encountered a computer with so much humanoid personality as this one. Probably Major Tom was one of the reasons Jackson had bought this moon and wanted to use it for research. "Yes, I'm special," Major Tom said, as if reading his mind, which Free found disconcerting. "So, who reprogrammed you?" "Why, your mentor, Jackson Mansfield." Free frowned. "Jackson came here himself?" "Once, just for a look-see. He didn't stay long. Left one of his subordinates behind to see if he could fix me." "And now you're fixed?" "I'm fixed." Free stood up and looked out the window. The others had gathered outside, and Brad was knocking on the door of the empty cabin between them. "What was wrong with you that you needed fixing?" Free asked, walking toward his door. "I was invaded." He stopped. "Invaded? By whom?" "Oh, I'm sorry. The memory chip has been removed. I only know that my programming was overridden to such a degree that I became useless in my intended capacity. Now that my system has been cleaned out and new chips have been installed, I'm as good as new. Why did the voice sound so sarcastic to Free? Was he imagining that? Once Free stepped outside into the sunshine that the dome artificially produced, the others had already reached his door. "So, let's check this place out," Linda said, as if she were in charge. "Right," Free jumped in. "We'll start with the store, see what's there, so we know if we need anything shipped to us." "It's really hot here," Anyar said, removing her jacket. "Can we get the computer to lower the temp a couple of degrees?" "I'm on it," the voice of Major Tom said. "Hey, instant service," Brad laughed. "I'm yours to command," Major Tom replied. There's that sarcasm again, Free thought. Nobody else's expression seemed to reveal that they'd heard it. Free started off toward the store before Linda or Brad or anybody else could take the lead. He felt pressured to assert himself, knowing that if he let his command slip this early into the project, it would not be good. The short trek across the dirt led them to a building half as large as the biggest cabin. The word store had been burned into the wood, hanging above the door. "Nice rustic touch," Linda said, rivaling the computer for sarcasm. They entered to find a well-stocked, old-fashioned-looking country store, full of freeze-dried and pressurized foods. Jars of nutrition capsules lined one shelf for those who didn't care about eating actual food, but needed to keep their vitamin and mineral intake at a reasonable level. They also found a cryonic storage bin with real food inside. Meat, veggies, everything they could want, waiting to be decrystallized and eaten. "Looks like we won't starve, at least for a while," Brad said, ripping open a packet of dried ratchet berries, a hybrid specialty fruit from Earth 2. He took a cup from the shelf above the water tank, emptied in the dried berries, and filled the cup with water, pressing the coldest button near the water spout. The cup filled with icy cold water, and the colorful berries began to explode in little multicolored puffs that swirled in the liquid as if they were dancing. Brad drank it down in one gulp, swapping the side of the cup with his tongue for the red, green, blue, and black frothy swirls. "That's pretty good," he said. "Not like the real fruit, but not bad." "What about bread?" Anyar asked. "I assume it's the frozen stuff?" "It is," Herbert stammered. "It's there." He pointed to a storage unit with the word bread printed on the front in 10 languages. "I eat a lot of bread and grains in general," Anyar suddenly announced. "Not good for you," Linda announced in an authoritative voice. "Too many carbs will unbalance your system." "I didn't say I eat too many carbs. I said I eat a lot of grains. I eat a lot of everything. I suffer from hyperthyroidism." Brad looked over her slight frame. "That's obvious." I've heard of that," Herbert said. "The body doesn't retain the solid, so the person eats all day long like a squirrel, but doesn't gain weight." "Sounds great," Linda said. "Where do I sign up?" "You've got to be born this way," Anyar said. I'm trying to gain 10 pounds. Well, I'm trying to lose 10. Well, I'm just about to look for 10 pounds of cereal. Anyar searched the bins and shelves, half by feel. Her sensors worked well for the big picture, but details were a little fuzzy. The technology was not perfect. Ah, here's a supply, but not much. I hope the rest of you don't eat much cereal, she said, holding a bag of grains in each hand up against her chest. We can always order more, Free assured her. All right, Linda said. I think we know we'll have enough food until the next supply ship arrives. Let's check out the facilities. Free's face burned. Why did she keep taking over like that? This was going badly. He had to assume command, but how? As the others trooped out behind Linda, Sky hung back. She blocked the door to say to Free, You know, if you're in charge here, you need to act like it. Otherwise, her royal bimboloidness will run things, unless you like being ordered around. Hey, we just got here. Give me some space, he snapped. We're here for 6 months. You don't have space, and I didn't sign on to be working with a weak team leader, or with the retro idiot. Before Free could belt back a snarky reply, Sky turned and left the building, leaving him standing waist-deep in a pool of fury. What the hell? They'd been on this moon for all of 60 minutes. Give him a chance. But she obviously wouldn't. Maybe none of them would. Free stomped after the others in a rather bad temper. Linda was already leading the team into the large gymnasium located beside the 50-meter outdoor pool. By the time he caught up with them, they were roaming around inside the facility. The equipment they'd seen outside on their arrival was way eclipsed by what was actually inside. There were exercise and fitness machines everywhere. This was the latest stuff. Free knew that Jackson had installed everything he could find that hadn't been invented until 5 years ago. Every piece of the newest state-of-the-art exercise equipment was there for all of them to use at their leisure. This is amazing, Anyar chirped. Herbert, who did not look like a physical type to begin with, had backed himself up against a wall as if terrified that someone might drag him onto the isometric restabilizer. Linda, Brad, and Sky moved around the space, climbing onto machines and checking out movable equipment. They hopped onto the pacers, flicked on the monitors overhead, and tried out the treadmills. Someone hit a button and the music system snapped on, blaring out a kind of sour ball sucker sound that annoyed the hell out of Free. He hated all the superficial music he'd been hearing since he'd left the satellite and arrived on Earth 2. And now it was here, too. Turn that off, he ordered. Linda, who sat astride a horse-like object, spun around to face him. Why? It's okay music. Because we need to communicate, and the music is in the way, he said, sounding wimpy to his own ears. Linda turned away from him, but did nothing to deal with the sounds blaring out of the octo speakers. Sky gave Free a withering look. Geez, he thought, stomping toward the panel and punching the silence button with his fist. The room filled with beautiful quiet, which suited him just fine. But he felt annoyed. No, fuck that. Angry. Pressured. He guessed nobody was going to allow him 5 seconds to get organized. Nobody wanted a chance to form friendships before they started work. Nobody, and he glared at Sky, would let him catch his breath. We'll head for the lab. That's where the hardware should be located. That is correct, the voice of Major Tom said, as if trying to bolster him. Right, Free said. We'll go there, see what's what, and I'll hand out assignments. Right away? Anyar asked. Don't we get a chance to acclimate? We've only been here 60 minutes, I think. Now he really felt stupid. They pushed, and when he tried to be friendly and flexible, they took advantage. And when he became firm and businesslike, they didn't like that either. Yes, he said, right away. The soonest we get to work, the better our chances of success. He strode out of the gym, a tad disoriented from the blinding artificial sunlight, and not quite sure in which direction to walk to get to the lab. Sky came out just behind him and apparently caught his confusion before he could disguise it. I think what you're looking for is over there, she said, pointing toward another large building up the road and opposite their lodgings. "Thanks," he said gruffly. She started off ahead of him at a rapid pace, not waiting for him to catch up. All of them were so exasperating. His legs were longer, he might outpace her, Free thought to himself, but then he would look stupid to the others who were now following like baby ducks. Except it wasn't Free they were following. It was Sky. He hated this. Why did he let Jackson talk him into leading this team? They should have had a leader with some experience, who knew how to work with people. "You'll do fine," Jackson had said. "You've got to start somewhere. This'll be good practice for you. You know you're like a son to me, and someday you'll inherit everything I own. You've got to gear up for that." As they crossed the dusty path, Free wondered if he would ever measure up to Jackson's expectations, or for that matter, his own. Sky entered the lab first and had a quick few seconds to glance around before the others swarmed in. The room was metallic silver, spotless, and crammed with the latest in digital equipment. A separate glassed-in room housed the biomechanical elements of the project. This was good. Very good. She could get in here and do some work on her own on a regular basis. Just what the doctor ordered. Behind her, she heard the others exclaim one by one how modern the computers were, how the imaging screen, which took up a large section of one wall, was utterly perfect, how the biomechanically clean room was spectacular, all the things Sky herself had been thinking. Everybody had something to say, except for Free. She turned silently to watch him out of the corner of her eye. She needed to boost this guy's confidence. He had to be in control of the project because, if he wasn't, someone else would be, and she suspected that someone would be Linda, and by extension, Brad. Those two obnoxious busybodies would make it hard for her to conduct private experiments of what she was convinced. If Free could just get a handle on his job as boss of this chain gang, he would be in control, which would mean that she would be in control because she would control him. It was quite obvious that he was attracted to her. Normally, she would never encourage anything that involved her to utilize her many womanly assets. In fact, she'd always felt it was beneath her to use sex appeal to manipulate, which was one of the reasons why Linda annoyed her so much. Brad only did her bidding because of her exposed belly button, with the titanium horsehead pendant dangling from it. Well, Sky knew she could and would do anything she needed to make sure her private project got underway. She had a past to confront, a future to unfold, and all of it hinged on being able to use the equipment surrounding her. The end would justify the means. If flirting and manipulation were the only ways in which she could control the situation, then so be it. There were worse things in life, like nightmares. Nightmares that were real. The extremely ugly metal face. The creature that stalked her every night. "It's a beautiful place to work," Sky said, running her hands over the main console. "Lift," she said, and a monitor rose from the desk. "Expand and open." The screen expanded in both directions and came to life. A voice that sounded suspiciously like Major Tom said, "What function would you like to activate?" "Diary," she said to a suddenly silent room. The others stopped talking for a moment. "How come you're keeping a diary? That seems so juvenile," Linda remarked. "Because it's good to have a record of your life, of all the small events that occur in a day, and how they can lead to something greater. You can go back and see how things progressed." "That makes sense," Anyar said. "Sounds like a waste of time," Brad said, and Linda laughed. "It's my time to waste." "Not right now, it isn't," Free said. Sky turned to him with narrowed eyes, but he wasn't looking at her. Instead, he was focusing his attention on a finger clip he'd taken from his pocket, pausing to read it. "Just so everybody knows who everybody else is." "We already know one another," Linda said snidely, but Free continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. "Here's the list and the schedule. As you all know, we've been commissioned by Jackson Incorporated to create a cybernetic being that emulates the mental abilities, physical capabilities, and even personality of a real human being." "You think?" Brad said. "I thought we were here to work out on that fine gym equipment." Linda, of course, laughed. Everybody else stood silently, ignoring the couple. To that end, we have here a team of engineers eminently qualified to work toward the creation of the perfect cyborg. Does anybody use the term cyborg anymore? Linda asked. No one I know, Brad said. Free ignored them. Sky Fellows, cyber engineer, will be in charge of developing the cybernetic brain. Sky, I've scheduled you for the night shift. Linda Barnes, cyber engineer in charge of synthesizing emotional responses and reactions. You're scheduled for the morning shift. Cyber programming engineer Brad Simpson is in charge of developing the program to replicate biochemical movement. Brad, you're on afternoons. Anyar Singh and Herbert Dearman, both biomechanical technicians, you will construct the biomechanical body based on Brad's programs, which will also incorporate both Sky and Linda's programs later on. Free pause before continuing. Anyar and Herbert will work together for at least the first month, with Brad in the afternoons. Once the system is up and working and the physical body of the cyborg can move freely, you'll be scheduled in with Sky and Linda. And that leaves me. I'll be overseeing this project, making sure that all parts fit, that everything works together as cohesive wholes, and that we're creating functions according to the particulars of the project description, which is this: to create a humanoid cybernetic being, one which cannot be distinguished from an actual human being. Hey, nothing to it, Anyar said enthusiastically for her. Brad then asked, do we get a bonus if we finish the job early? Probably, Free said, relieved that his speech had ended and falling easily into a trap. Quickly, he caught himself. But the chances are good we won't finish early. We'll be lucky if the project deadline doesn't need to be extended. Anyway, we have a highly developed computer brain to work with, Major Tom. One of our tasks will be to analyze MT's capabilities. But from what I can see so far, this program seems fairly independent. We can use Major Tom as a base to work from. We've got the software to replicate Major Tom? Sky asked. I cannot be replicated, Major Tom said. And why not? Sky demanded. Because, Mrs. Fellows, is it? Do I know you? I doubt it, Sky said uneasily, since I've never been to Elysium before. So why can't you be replicated? Because Dr. Arthur J. Castillo, my creator, programmed into the matrix of the parent computer a code which prohibits more than one replication, and I am that one replication, an only child, if you will. It's a safety measure. Should you try to replicate me, you will find my system shutting down, including the life support system for the Moon Complex. We knew MT was non-replicable, Free said. Our objective is to study his codes as thoroughly as we can, and also to study his behavioral patterns. So, Linda said, you're one of a kind, or at least one of a kind copy? The most technologically advanced computer brain in the universe? But you can't be replicated? Well, isn't that amusing? Precisely, Miss Barnes. By the way, you're wearing a fetching outfit. May I call you Linda? You may not. Everything can be replicated, Sky announced. Not me, I'm afraid, Major Tom said. You'll have to live with it. We'll see, Sky murmured. She had no intention of living with that. Major Tom harbored codes she needed for her work, and she would, if it killed her, if it killed all of them, find those codes and decipher them, even if it meant replicating the AI against the wishes of the infamous Dr. Arthur J. Castillo. She would find a way. Okay, this has been Chapter 2 of Jason X to the Third Power. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. I know Jason hasn't really made an appearance yet, but that AI, there's something going on with that AI, Major Tom, and I'm really curious to see how that part of the story plays out. I'm sorry for the short upload tonight, but going on through the book from here, the chapters get very, very long. Whenever I do these narrations, I like to keep the each upload to about 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, because anything more than that usually puts a strain on me, on my vocal cords and everything, and trying to get it read out without losing my voice. And the next chapter is so long that after this chapter was finished, if I had narrated it, this video would be almost like 2 hours long, and I just cannot do that right now. But I will be back very soon with chapter 3. There's only like 17 chapters in this book, and each chapter is pretty long. So I will try to do some double chapter uploads depending on the length of the chapters, but you can expect mostly one chapter uploads. And of course, once I get to the very end of this book and upload the final chapter or chapters, I will then, within a few days after that, I will compile the entire book into one upload and edit out all my intros and outros. So it's one fluid book. Let me know what you guys think of the book so far, of the characters of this AI Major Tom, and I will see you soon with more of Jason X to the Third Power. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and hope to see you next time.